Good evening. Welcome to this month's webinar, Projects in the Latin Classroom, presented by the North American Cambridge Classics Project and sponsored by Cambridge University Press. We are so delighted to have two presenters this evening, Stephanie Spaulding and Michelle Ramahlo. Stephanie has over 20 years of experience teaching with the Cambridge Latin course. She teaches at Hamden Hall Country Day School in Hamden, Connecticut, where she leads a Latin program that covers grades 5 through 12. Stephanie also has a passion for mentoring teachers, and she contributed to NACCP's online self-paced teacher training course. In addition to C, her passions include travel, thrifting, and collecting teddy bears. Michelle teaches Latin to middle schoolers in grades 5 through 8 at a public school in Chappaqua, New York. She loves helping students connect with Latin through acquisition-based methods and stories from the Cambridge Latin course. At home, she enjoys life in New York with her husband, two kids, and their dog. We are recording this webinar, and the link will be posted on the training page of the NACCP website in just a few days, and you can find that at cambridgelatin.org/training. If you would need a professional development certificate for this evening's webinar, just please email training@cambridgelatin.org and we will get a certificate to you very quickly. And on that note, we will let Stephanie and Michelle tell you about Latin projects.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Martha. So just to start, we wanted to give you a roadmap of where we plan to go in this presentation. We've divided up into a few categories: the core, the why. Why do we use projects? Why would you want to use projects? And what are the whys behind the projects we design? Quomodo, the how. How can you plan and execute your projects with really thinking of setting yourself up for success? Projects can be amazing. It can be fun. It can also be a nightmare for you and your students. So we think that planning can really help. And then Quid. What are some examples and anecdotes that we've experienced in our classrooms at the different levels? And as a takeaway, we want to give you several ideas, including a planning worksheet that you yourself can use to implement when you're thinking about designing projects to use with your students. To start, let's think really big about the word project. Want to start by acknowledging that the word project means a lot of different things to a lot of people. We have a rich sort of philosophy of project-based learning. That's what it means to some people, where the project is the curriculum. We have other people that think of projects as the add-ons, the fun, the things you assign for the kids to do at home and then show up on project day with their poster, their diorama, and then everything in between. Group projects, individual projects, there are so many iterations of projects. So when I think of the word project, of course, I have to go to the etymology and think about the root meaning of project. Pro and ject, the pro, forth, moving forward, driving forth. And of course, the yakara part's throwing. So I kind of imagine a net that we're throwing out and we'll sort of see what we'll catch. And we're catching all of these different kinds of projects. And also I kind of think of the product that is produced in these projects as something that will sort of like an arrow fly out as a unique product of the kids' learning. So I just want to ask for your sort of help thinking of a very flexible definition of projects as we move through the presentation. We are going to sort of go through some of the various iterations and So bear with us as we kind of stop over in different kinds of project land.
So both of us are experienced teachers, and both of us are teaching Latin classes where the goal is learning to read Latin. And both of us use projects extensively in our classes. And so the first stop on this journey is the why. Why use projects? And this list is grounded in pedagogy and project-based learning world, right? So projects elicit higher order thinking, first of all, and that is the main reason to use them. Students are thinking deeply about things that hopefully they care about, especially when we push their thinking and keep asking them questions. And that last part is absolutely crucial. For me, projects orient students to the big ideas in our classes. We're not focusing in on the nitty-gritty of whatever that particular, accusative plural is. We're zooming out and thinking big. And students choose Latin if they choose it in your school. Sometimes they have to take it, but sometimes they choose it. And these projects often honor the why for students who chose Latin. When they're fifth graders, they're not necessarily signing up for Latin because they love the dative. They might. They're signing up for Latin because they're interested in the ancient world or mythology. And so these projects can help honor that. Projects orient students to the work that people in our field are actually doing. So we can teach them to think like historians. Even though we're not in a history class, our subject touches that. We can teach them to think like an archaeologist or an art historian or even a linguist. So we're using all of these multidisciplinary skills to teach students how to be future archaeologists and to show them that that's something that someone can actually do. In our districts and our schools, every school has 21st century learning goals, and most of them are around collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. They're great to be observed on. Admins love them. They really fit into the goals of many schools and districts. When you put them up on display, a beautiful, well-designed project can be an important way to communicate relevance and accessibility and community engagement. They can promote your program for you. Wow, look what the Latin kids are doing. And we both think that projects are fun, but that's not the only reason why we do them. On the bottom right is an image from the project-based learning website. And they have these really specific gold standards for what a project should look like. And sometimes we can hit those in our projects in our class, and sometimes we can't, but we always strive to hit some of them. So we want the project to be driven by the student. We want the project to be reflective. We want the students to own their project. Authenticity can be problematic sometimes, but if it is geared towards something like history or archaeology, we can make it happen. And sustained inquiry, where they're researching and thinking hard and for a long time. So again, the gold standard is identifying a project or problem that students work on, often with their peers, engaging in sustained inquiry, getting feedback and critique that supports revision, sharing the work with a wider audience, and then reflecting on what they learned. But that's not all they have to have, right? So for us, as when Stephanie said, widen the definition, think about the word proyectio, a project might be stepping outside the normal routine. We're going to take a break from working through our chapter and pause and focus in on gladiators. It might also mean that we're assessing students in a different way. A project is a way to show what students can do sometimes that isn't a paper and pencil test. Projects are a way for us to deepen inquiry. We might take what is an assignment and extend it and make it more intense, more sustained. Go back and reread again and again. Projects can be community building and promoting your program. No matter what you do with your project, though, the absolutely most important part of a project is giving students feedback and offering them revision. If you just have them working than give them a rubric and never have them go back and revise what they're working on, that can stop the learning. The kids think about what the grade is going to be. But feedback and revisions are crucial for deepening and extending the learning. So if nothing else, I mean, if you don't want to use any of our projects, that's okay. But I would say if you are going to do a project, at least, at the very least, before they finish, offer them some glows and grows or whatever your district calls it, ways to deepen it, ways to extend it, or questions to ask them, and let them have a chance to revise it with your adult feedback. So you might come to this webinar and be a little hesitant about doing a project. I have so much material to cover. We have so many stories to read. I have so many grammar points I want to get to. And those are valid. And here are some of the other things that we thought may be holding us back. Projects might spend too much time in English and not be language oriented. If we're trying to get students to acquire Latin, we don't want to spend a ton of time in English necessarily, and that's valid. Projects can be time consuming. You might not feel like you have 2 weeks to devote to a project. If you're asking students to write in Latin, you might be worried that they're writing at a level that they're not ready for. That's a valid concern too. Some teachers feel out of control when they give a project. I can't keep them on track. They're talking too much. The class feels kind of wild. I have run into the problem of having a lack of source material at students' level. One time I tried to turn a stage one Roman house project, which I do with fifth grade, into something a little bit deeper. And the students were really interested in all this cool stuff about the houses, and they wanted to know, how do you clean the impluvium? We never found that out. But there was nothing that a fifth grader could read that had that information. There were, Italian and German research papers for PhD students, but those weren't accessible to my students. And so I had to kind of pull back on that project due to a lack of source material at their level. Another problem may be that we're worried if kids will like it or not. And finally, there's the Grecian urn problem. Projects that look creative but really don't provide any learning for students. So you make this beautiful product, but nobody actually learned anything along the way. These are all valid concerns. And we hope that in the course of the webinar, we can address these concerns. And if you have these concerns too, you'll share them and we can talk about them. But despite all of this fear, we still think that projects are worth doing because they do deepen and extend the learning, and especially because we have a subject that people choose to take. So when we want students in our classes, we want to make things that are engaging for them. But I think the most important thing here is that we are honest with ourselves about why we're doing a project. We don't want to pretend that a project is something that it's not, but we want to offer options for why we're doing them, and validate that sometimes doing things for fun is okay. Sometimes doing things to promote your program is okay. You have to know your goals and know your program and know your admin, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Stephanie, anything to add here?
I just want to add in that one word that we haven't mentioned yet that is just right on the tip of my brain is memorable. And when
Mm,
it comes to why, sometimes memorable is a really compelling reason for me. We have a lot of kids that forget everything that we teach them. Let's be honest. In a year, 10 years, they won't remember. So I also want to think about giving the kids an opportunity to have something so memorable that they will remember it for the rest of their lives.
right,
And sometimes that helps me combat the fear of time I'm giving up, of is this serious academics, and all of the other challenges that you mentioned. So the other side of the fears, the project fears, is that idea that we can really get to someplace memorable.
right.
So I just kind of keep coming back to that word memorable.
I think that's great. And I also would say, just to go back to the PBL slide, when we design projects, when Stephanie and I design projects, and we've both been teaching for around the 18 to 20 year mark, we have to go through this process. You think of a project, you design a project, you do it the first year. You realize some things you want to tweak, and you come back to it the next year, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you keep doing it until the project is what works for you and your students. So a project itself, designing it for us teachers is project-based learning. Like designing the project, you have to go through this, get the feedback, see, reflect. It all is part of the process. So we're giving you projects that we've refined and created over a long career. They won't all being perfect, but if you believe in projects and you believe in the reason to do them, then it's worth the effort and time that it takes to go through the process to get it the way that you and the students need it to be. So one way to do that is to have sort of a template of how to think about your project.
So the how. So this session actually gave us the chance to put down on paper what I've always kind of done in my head. It's kind of something I love, so it kind of felt easy to me. But when I was thinking about how to model this for others through this webinar, coming up with a real worksheet that you can do step by step, I thought would be really helpful. So this is the first QR code you're seeing tonight. The QR code on your screen will take you to a link of this document, our project planning worksheet, which you can also save a copy of and edit it to serve your purposes, and fine tune it for what you need. So I'll just take you through the steps of, the typical steps of planning a project. So I think we should start with why. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. I love to read and reread that book every year. And starting with why is super important. I mentioned making it memorable, but our whys come in so many different ways. One why might be we're going to practice a really specific grammar or vocabulary topic. Another why might be to experience problem solving when it comes to creating a work of art. There are a lot of different whys, but you got to know your why. One of my big whys, and I try to have one sort of big project every year that is kind of like my advertising project, basically. So one of my whys is every year, what kind of project am I going to do this year that's so cool that it's going to get in my school's newsletter, and it's going to get sent out in part of the email blast to the whole school community, so everybody has eyes on Latin for 1 week out of the year. So PR may be a very legitimate why. A why might be we're going to dive deep into philosophy. We recently did with my Latin 3 class the Philosophia chapter, and I said, well, students should know something about all the different sort of, top 10 philosophers of the ancient world. So I assigned everybody one philosopher, and they had to learn about them and make a poster. So that's another why, to have the kids sort of share the learning burden and the teaching burden. So really think about your why. You may have multiple whys, and I think we actually should have multiple whys when it comes to designing a project, trying to hit all of that color wheel of elements from the project-based learning, or try to hit all of the different sort of categories, whether it's language, whether it's culture, literature, history, all the different sort of areas that you can pack into one are great. Then you got to think about time. And this is probably the number one thing I hear from teachers of why they hate projects. They take up so much time. So if we're going to use so much time, it should be a worthy use of time. Right now, this time of year is always when I do my poetry memorization project. So every single one of my students, middle and upper school, will memorize an entire 8 to 14 line poem in Latin. Each class all memorizes the same poem, 2 to 3 lines per night. We practice. We probably take up half of our class time practicing, coaching, rehearsing, talking about the meaning, and it burns up 2.5 weeks of class time. And I think it's so worth it. And it's maybe the most authentic thing I do the entire year. And I'm so glad that when their grandparents and their own grandchildren are taking Latin, and their little grandchildren say, I'm taking Latin, they're going to say, Orma virum quecano, or whatever the poem might be. And I think that is a great why. And I think that's worth every minute of class time and then some to have them experience the language so authentically. So time, yep, it takes time, but also it can be very worth the time, not just in class time, but also the homework time. And the worksheet here will help you to consider what that's going to be. Now, assessment. And Michelle, you talked a little bit about assessment and feedback. And I want to add one layer. I think it's really important to have the students also do self-assessing. So I love to have the students not only getting, early feedback from me, a final grade from me, but also have a chance to do a final reflection and assessment of their own work. I love doing that. And that becomes really helpful when if you ever need to defend a grade that a student is getting. Oftentimes they'll be very honest about critiquing their own work. More honest than you would think. And then another hurdle, which I totally get, is budget. Projects can be expensive, not only for you and your classroom budget, but also for the students. So if we are assigning a project where you have to create something at home, I think we have to really be considerate of equity and considering whether some students may have access to the resources, financial resources they need to be successful with the project. So I really do think we should reflect on that and make an effort to make sure that our projects are affordable and can be made with pretty much household materials, or that we have a system in place where we're going to provide materials for the kids to take home. And budgets are important. We have to be super creative about how we come up with materials. Teacher sees trash and turns it into treasure. Okay, so I think, and this is related, Martha, to my thrifting passion, that yes, I do thrift a lot of materials for projects and then upcycle them into projects. So one of my favorite projects that I'm not featuring today is that I thrifted a few dozen dolls and had my students think of like American Girl knockoff dolls, and my students created mythological creatures, gods and goddesses from them. So that was a really cool project. And you'll see another way I'm upcycling in projects later too. So that helps me with my budget. And from year to year, sometimes there's money, sometimes there's not. There is always a cheap or free project to be made, I'm convinced. And the poetry contest or the poetry memorization that I just mentioned is a free project that anybody can do. Free, incredibly valuable, and low budget.
Just to jump in for a second about your budget, if you have a STEAM lab or a library or someplace that has funding and doesn't ever know how to spend it, that's a great place to go for materials as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of local museums and libraries are sitting there waiting for you to call them on their phone. I want to do this. Can you help me? I also send out a lot of like appeals to the school. I'm looking for hangers. I'm looking for cardstock. I'm looking for glitter. Who's got it? And a lot of the time somebody will come up with, sharing those materials. So I'm lucky to be in a very generous school, but I think most schools are generous.
Can I pop in one thought on
Of
that?
course.
When I would do my back to school night, introductory thing, and I'd give out some kind of a handout, the last item on there was my wish list.
Mhm.
Dolls that you didn't want anymore, material, whatever. And inevitably, within the next few weeks, shopping bags would come in, some full, some only partially full. And most of it I could use. Once in a while, I was like, okay. But I think you just have to, as you said, ask. And it's amazing.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea. And I also think that because we're language teachers, almost all of us are going to be teaching multiple preps. This year, I've got 5 preps. we could all share how many preps we have. So one of the ways that I save myself is I do a lot of cross-level projects. So I can design a project that every middle and upper school student can do wherever they are in the Cambridge Latin course. So sometimes that means stepping away from it has like directly related to what they're doing in their chapter. but it's a chance to maybe visit some themes that aren't in the Cambridge Latin course, like some of the mythology themes, expand on that, or something that the students are particularly interested in or studying in another class. So cross-level projects allow you to do all of this work just once. However, the flip side of that is you have to do a different project the next year, or your kids are going to be repeating. So I prefer variety, and I like to do that sort of reinvent every year, but both techniques work really well.
That's a good point, actually, to the other way that projects can work in that way in the multi-prep world that all of us Latin teachers live in is that if you have one of your grades doing a project, if you stagger your projects, then you have three preps for a couple of weeks or whatever number of preps for a couple of weeks while the students are working on that project. So it can sort of give you a break in the multiple prep world.
Yep, I feel like we have to hack the system and figure out how it's going to be, of course, a great experience for the kids, but how is it also going to be a great experience for us?
Yes,
Thinking
absolutely.
of when we time them in the year, proximity to vacations can also be a great thing. I love to do projects the 2 week or two before vacations. Keeps them tuned in because it's novel. So novelty is so great. So typically the kids will start checking out a week and a half before break, but this way they are like super excited to come to class because they're painting or whatever it might be.
So we wanted to give you some samples from our classrooms, and I can tell you that both of us do way more projects than this. So we just picked some samples of the things that we were able to share. But we, we both we have a plethora to choose from. So these are the ones that we chose to share with you because we wanted to sort of put them into certain categories. So the first two are about learning Latin and like things to do to stay in Latin, and deepen and extend Latin. The second chunk is about cultural stuff. It may be in Latin, it might not be in Latin, but it's more oriented towards history or culture. And finally, the last projects are about creative expression or fun or community building. They may or may not be in Latin, mostly not, but they produce a beautiful a product that can be shared and sent out and that are fun for the kids and make them so happy that they chose Latin. So we're going to get into the details of the projects. So we're starting in the blue book. This is stage 15, where Salius and Rufilla are arguing. And this started as an assignment that was in the you know, what that the not the teacher's manual, but this activity masters. And it was not deep enough, I felt. I felt it needed some beefing up. So we read the stories that of Salvius and Rufilla arguing, and then this assignment comes up, which is asking students to read the text closely, identifying, quoting unkind or problematic language in the arguments, saying why they're wrong using their socio-emotional skills, supporting their ideas with evidence from the text, and then reframe the discussion using other words that they could say. So this doesn't take very long. It's only about a week. The kids are going back and rereading, but it's deepening and extending their thinking about the story. So they're not just reading the story for understanding, they're reading the story for really getting into the characters and thinking about how these characters responded to each other unkindly and how you wouldn't want to do that in your real life, how this relationship work. It is assessed, and there is a rubric I provide. So I'm just going to click on the assignment. It doesn't require any materials. So is this a project? Maybe by some definitions, it's an assignment, but it is deepening and extending students' learning. So by that token, I would say it's a project. So in this assignment, you have the directions, the rubric, where the students type an example of what they're looking for. And then at the end, students share their favorite piece of advice on a Padlet. So they say, just for an example, vir crudelis est. Starting a conversation with "you are a cruel man" is overall unkind and rude in general as she is speaking with her husband. So the students are explaining why they're quoting. The student actually didn't, you know, translate. Oh, she did. You are a cruel man. So they're just explaining why it's not kind and what she should have said instead. So instead of starting with this, Rufilla could have greeted Sawius in a kinder way, such as "Mi Sawi, I Quid tibi dicere volo," which she actually took from a different reading, but that's okay. So this is what this looks like. Is it hammering things on cardboard? No, this is all sort of language oriented, but it is deepening and extending students' learning. It's easy to implement, it's 100% free, and it requires students to go back into the text, just like they have to do in AP Latin. So I think this is a great assignment that Cambridge Latin course came up with. I just put my own spin on it and refined it over the years. So I didn't invent this. I just got the idea from a book activity that was already there and just made it a little bit longer, a little bit deeper, and a little bit more learning. And so when the students are working on this, I walk around the room and I ask them questions and I say, "Do you really think that if she said, you know, this, that would help?" And in the conversation that we have, the students deepen and extend their learning. So that's what that project's all about. You have this here if you'd like to use it. It is all there for you, and you can just make your own copies of everything. Let me go back to the
I just want to say too, Michelle, this is great because they're interacting with each other.
yeah.
This sharing it in the Padlet can motivate them to like go and read each other's because they can add the heart and the like if they want to. And this is that idea of communities. And they're sharing, they're communicating their thoughts to other people. They're
Right.
getting feedback on how they've communicated. I think that is great. And I also think you could adapt this project format to other points in the Cambridge Latin course. If you look around at where conflict lies, maybe the Melissa Metella conflict in the Red Book, maybe the Haterius and Wittelia conflict in the Green Book, various different places. There are other places you could adapt for sure.
I don't know what I clicked. I'm sorry. I think that what takes something from being an assignment to being a project is just what you said. Students looking at each other's work, thinking about each other's work, interacting with each other's work that can move something out of assignment world and into project world. Great point.
And great modeling of the fact that you can start with just a worksheet and then blow it up into a larger assignment, not all at once, over years, develop it that way. It's fantastic.
So for this particular thing, there is a QR code that you can use with your phone or on your screen now, but there's also a link in the actual document itself. So that is there for you.
So this one is a project that I too inherited from my fellow teacher, Sarah Morris. If you're out there watching, Magister Morris, I hope you realize we're still keeping this project alive. And it's a project where we are focusing in on one of the main grammatical themes of the Blue Book, which is noun adjective agreement, and learning the 5 cases. So the why is I want students to practice this idea of noun adjective pairs and noun adjective agreement to get to know those 5 cases a little better. And the concept of endings changing and agreement, and also create something that embraces the theme of the second half of the Blue Book, which is Roman Egypt. I also want them to do something creative, homemade, hands-on, that will require them to do like some STEM type problem solving. The thing with creating a mobile is that you have to figure out a way to make it balance. You have to figure out a way that it can hang and not fall apart. It has to be sturdy. So there's some problem solving. And this project will be done typically by middle schoolers. So it's a good age. But I will try it this year with my cross division Latin 1 class, so middle and upper school students. So forgive me for the fact that this project does not photograph well, but these are mobiles that will be hung from the ceiling. And then the students will, for each of the items hanging down, they will decline nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative, those noun adjective pairs, singular and plural. So this one is done mainly outside of class, and it'll be about a week's homework. And we'll take for instruction, I know it's going to take me, especially with middle schoolers, It's going to take me one full class to explain the directions. And then the first night's homework is they pick their word, their noun adjective pair, they pick their words, and they fill in a sheet with all of the forms, 5 cases, declined, singular, and plural. Then I'm going to check that the next day. So there's your feedback along the way, which will really help them make sure they get it right when they come to design their dangling cards. And I always tip for people who are just starting out, especially if you're going to give a project that's something you have to make at home, it's really good to include a weekend. So you don't want to assign it on Monday and have it due on Friday, because parents won't have time to help them shop or figure out, and weekends are just so much less busy. So I always try to include at least one weekend, sometimes 2 weekends. So it could be assigned a Friday, have an entire week, another weekend, and then have it due on a Monday if it's a bigger project. I also like to have, especially for middle schoolers, but really all levels, make sure that there's a nightly assignment, a nightly chunk of the greater project to keep them accountable for chunking away at it each night. So for middle schoolers, I will check that work the next day, and they have to provide either their work on their planning sheet, a picture of what they've created. They have to prove that they're keeping up with the nightly assignments so that they don't end up in a point where they're behind. For assessing this project, it'll be assessed and there's a rubric, and I'll add a self-assessment piece of that rubric as well. And budget, this one's pretty easy. It can be made out of household items and other craft supplies. And I always have, random things that I can let the kids use. One thing I like to do, people have different stances on this. I don't like to allow printouts. So I don't like to let them print things out and just use that in their mobile. I like to have it all handmade. So I think there are very few opportunities for them to be sort of forced to put their hands to it and make it. That's my position. I really like to encourage that kind of thing. So we could go to the next slide where I have some more examples, and there's a QR code that will take you to my instructional sheet, planning sheet, and the rubrics as well. So, yep, they don't photograph well, but they look really cool in the room, but when they're hung in the ceiling, it's really bad for any kids that have attention problems or teachers that have attention problems, because they definitely do distract your attention. But they look really cool. I like having them up at the end of the year as something fun.
What I like about this too is that it's like sort of automatically differentiated. So on the previous page, you have this incredible artwork, but these don't have as incredible of artwork, but the learning is still
Yep.
there. So it's
Yep.
automatically sort of differentiated for that. So this project is something that has been in the works for a long time. I was trying to figure out how to really get into the meaty and exciting archaeology of stage 12. And I tried so many things for so many years, and none of them were doing exactly what I wanted. So, this is the final iteration, and I'm finally happy with it after many years. So, students research objects that would have survived the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, research the impact of the eruption on those objects, and then recreate the objects and write a museum display card about them and their significance. This takes a long time, and it is entirely in English, except for maybe if you read, um, if there's any excerpts of Pliny's letter that you can read, but they can't really read that at this point in their Latin career. So this is in English. So we're stepping away from Latin for this. We are definitely fully we're in English, but we're learning about Pompeii and the eruption. So it takes, I would say, about 2 weeks. The building and creating takes quite a bit of time. And then a day where the students set up their objects as a museum display, and you invite parents, administrators, other teachers, other classes. In New York, the sixth grade social studies curriculum is Greece and Rome. So I invite the sixth grade social studies classes in to see the museum displays, and the students have to talk about what they've made and why they made it and what it does. The project is assessed. There is a rubric. It does require substantial amounts of material. The STEAM lab in my school is where we worked, and the STEAM lab in my school is where I got everything. So we needed clay and paint, dirt for messing up things. So they have to create their object and then mess it up, bury it, cover it in dirt, break it. Cardboard is a STEAM teacher and a project person's best friend. We scavenge Amazon boxes and use that for a lot of things. Beads, aluminum foil, and the PR aspect of this is inviting people to come and see what your students are doing. So this project, like a lot of these projects, there are many, many steps involved in this, and I'm sure Stephanie will agree with this. Breaking things down into smaller chunks, especially for younger students, is crucial. You cannot plunk this down in front of students. So this is long and involved, but that's for me. Like I needed to have the entire thing written up in a way that I could understand it. But then everything is broken down into different chunks. So the first step is researching. So I created a document with resources in these different categories where students have to find something from each category to be able to answer my questions, which is what do eyewitness accounts tell us about the eruption? What do scientists know about the eruption? What kind of objects were found, which they're using by looking at museum catalogs, right? So here's a bunch of museums and also just their own background knowledge. And then how did the eruption affect those objects? How would something in Herculaneum, say, survive differently than it would in Pompeii? So, that requires a lot of research on the kids' part. And that part of things was actually inspired by Natalie Mitchell in her project on archaeology. She has a similar project. It's not really similar, actually, it's different, but the research part inspired my part. Students have to then brainstorm and talk to me about what they're thinking. And we go back and forth about, would that object have survived? What would have happened to it? Would it have been broken? Would it have been buried? Would it have made it? And then we have to start thinking about who would have owned it. Um, so where was it? Where was it found? Who owned it? And they can make up a person. It doesn't have to be a real person, but they may say this object was owned by, an upper class Pompeian. This object would have been owned by someone who was enslaved. And so thinking about those things, maybe not owned, but, it would have been with them. There are rubrics provided, and just for people who couldn't attend the museum showcase, we also made another Padlet. We photographed the objects the best we could, and students had to write up their museum card underneath it. And then if anybody couldn't come, people could look and see their objects. So, this was a fresco over here. It's supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be Poseidon. It's covered in dirt. It got buried. This is a signet ring. This is, I think, a statue. Someone made earrings. We have access to a 3D printer, so the student 3D printed some earrings. This is a perfume bottle. It's made out of tape, just tape. I don't know how the student did it. It's incredible, but she just took tape and made it into a perfume bottle. It was amazing. This is this is a ring found on a finger. So they actually included the bone. I was like, at first I wasn't sure if I was going to let her do it, but the bone was so cool that I was like, yes, you can. A strigil made out of aluminum foil, right? A Kawe Kanam sign. This person actually did the plaster cast. So there's all kinds of objects here. And the point is actually not the object. The
That's
point
so
is all
cool.
of the research and thinking that goes into it. And so the objects are cool and the kids get to show off what they did, but that is not the point of this project. So, if these earrings are made out of clay and kind of whatever, that's not really the point. The point is all of the work that they and thinking that they did to get to that point. So I am finally happy this with this. I love it. I'm happy with how it turned out. So if you want to try something like this too, it is time consuming and you're not talking in Latin, but it turns into really great stuff and really great thinking. And it's about what we're studying and it's about the ancient world. And I think it's a winner.
As Stephanie says, it's memorable.
Yes, absolutely.
Stephanie, you have a question before we go on. Brian Mumper says, I know there is an instruction sheet, but can you explain the Mobiles project in like 30 seconds? I see it, but I don't understand yet.
So, right. So we're picking a noun adjective pair. So, and then we have all of the singulars on one string and all of the plurals on the other string. So you have like bonus, puer, boni, pueri, and so on. So each card dangling down is the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and so on, singular, and then the same plural. So you're basically doing a full chart of that noun adjective pair, all the cases declined, but you're putting each on a card and then putting them in descending order so they're hanging. So it's kind of like a visual artistic representation of a noun adjective declension chart.
Really very clever.
I want to include something from later chapters. So one of my favorite chapters is the Marshall epigram chapter. And I used to have the kids each pick an epigram and then make a poster of it. And I did that for many, many years. And then last year realized that that is sometimes kind of dumb. So we, in our discussion of epigrams, what is an epigram? What is this weird, cool form of poetry? We talked about how like it's kind of like TikToks. It's boiled down to a really short form content. And so some of the students even came up with the idea that like epic is kind of like a 3-hour movie, and epigrams are like a TikTok or a YouTube short. So instead of having each kid choose a poem, learn it, and show it visually in a poster, we decided to do TikToks instead. And the real goal is translate it, not literally, but translate the meaning of the poem into modern terms and make it relevant to you today. We always are in a situation where we're trying to restate poetry so our kids understand it. So that's kind of what I'm asking them to do, to convey the heart and soul of a Marshall epigram using a TikTok. So the kids will mostly do this at home. It'll be a little instruction, a few check-ins, and then the final day it's due, the class will share the work. The kids will give them a rubric. I'll assess them. They'll self-assess as well. And the budget is none. Some kids do need like we assume the kids know the technology. Some kids might need a little help figuring out how to create it. But once they get the idea, they're really into it. We're speaking their language. So we'll just play a few and let them speak for themselves.
High East has teeth white as snow, where Lacinia's teeth are, not so white. Why is that? High East bought hers, where Lacinia's are real.
Oh, this girl has purchased them. She has her own. She says, excuse me, I am the poet and you're only the audience member. You're supposed to listen to me and I'm supposed to recite. Wait, are you Pontilianus? I know exactly what to say about you. Why do I not send my books to you, Pontilianus, so that you won't send your books to me, Pontilianus?
Don't indicate that I never would know. Treat me like what you don't get me dirty. The video you just witnessed was under the count of Sextus. The video had received 10 billion views, reaching far and wide to the HUDs all over the earth. And I know Sextus personally. Well, about Sextus, he's a very boastful man. You see that beautiful girls burn for your love. But Sextus, you have a face that, swam underwater, if you know what I mean.
That's right, Marshall. Sick burn. Sick burn.
Oh,
I wish I taught this stage so I could do this.
I know. Bravo.
And the credit goes all to my students. I get the idea, but they're the ones who know how to execute it. And I think that the short form content, there may be other opportunities if we're creative to put it in different chapters, but epigrams, it really is a perfect fit. So
One question. This is a strange question, but like, so like I don't understand any of their lingo. How do you know that it's appropriate? Like, how do you know that it's okay for them to say some stuff? Do you have to like ask them to explain it to you?
Well, I'm pretty down with the kids. I do my research with the brain rot and all, but we end up having quite a lot of frank conversations about it too.
Okay.
So, if I'm not sure what something means and and I come to them like, so is this cool or like for school or what? We'll have a conversation about it basically. And luckily also I wouldn't publish these. I mean, publishing here, but this is just for our classroom community. So if somebody does make a mistake, then we could talk about it just in our classroom and not have to worry about that going beyond too.
That is fair.
Now, my favorite project of this year, it reaches back to my bio, which is uniting my love of teddy bears and thrifting and the Roman world. So basically all my favorite things. I did not come up with the idea of toga teddies. In fact, it is one of the most popular workshops at our Connecticut State Latin Day. And the idea for doing this project at our school was that it's so popular at Latin Day that none of my students ever get to do the workshop because there's tickets and they can't get in. So I told them last year, don't worry, next year we'll do toga teddies our way. And so I decided to, make it so they could have this fun experience and then go off to Latin Day and not have to worry about trying to wait in line to get into the toga teddies tent. So we decided that we would do this right before winter break as a fun reward and wrap it into our Saturnalia party. And the idea is quite simple. We are going to dress up teddy bears in togas or stolas. So we learn a little bit about Roman clothes. We learn a little bit about Roman names and dates because they're just like Build-A-Bear Workshop. They're going to get a certificate with the date of adoption. They're going to pick a Roman name for their bear. And that is going to be a little bit about dates, but mostly it's fun. And going back to that idea of memorable, this is kind of emblematic of that. So we took a few days to celebrate our Saturnalia, learn about Saturnalia, dress up our wonderful bears. I have a link here to my Saturnalia presentation that teaches about Saturnalia, has instructions on toga teddies, and bonus, if you saw Ginny posting my ugly Saturnalia sweaters, that's here too.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love those.
If you want the non-copyrighted images, send me a message and I'll get you the sweaters and the characters.
I think I do.
Yes, they were quite good.
Super.
Yeah,
They were
those are
super fun.
great.
And I'll finish with one of my favorite projects that I've ever done. It wanted to create a mural project. And this is a theme that you've heard, which is, I didn't make this up. I got it from a wonderful longtime Latin teacher here in Connecticut named Nina Barkley, who created a mural like this for our Connecticut State Latin Day. It's so beautiful. I wanted to have my students create something we can display for years, working together, learning about the myth of Hercules, having this mural to teach the myth of Hercules to all of the Red Book students. And basically, again, this was done before March break, the last couple of weeks before our March break. And we, stopped learning, I'm using air quotes, and really took time to go deep in this project. And I'll just have you go to the next slide so you can see we're pretty happy with how it came out. So we display this for at least a couple of months out of the year in our classroom. It's 20 feet by 4 feet, displaying 4 scenes from Hercules. I collaborated with one of the art teachers. I designed it, she sketched it, the kids painted it. And super proud of it. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the in process pictures. And going back to the theme of how to advertise your program, I just put a screenshot of the article that was in our newsletter and a quote from my administrator, Brian Chrisman, who said, it is so important for students to be active, excited, and engaged. And varying the types of learning opportunities helps to create a deeper connection to the material and fosters genuine intellectual curiosity.
So Brian Mumper again has a question about a project that you spoke about. He wants to know, does not knowing how to sew, was that at all an impediment for the kids when they did the Tocotetes?
I love the fact that I can teach the kids how to thread a needle and do basic stitch. So some of our students come knowing how to sew a little bit, some of them don't. I had lots of safety pins available if they didn't need to sew, but if they wanted to sew, I taught them how to thread a needle and do a basic stitch. And I'm super proud that I can send them off into the world at least knowing how to thread a needle. Those skills are important to me, and part of projects is kind of like me showing my heart to my students. I think it helps us connect. And through the bears, through these passions that I have, I think they see me more as a real person, and we do things together. And I think that really helps me build a relationship with my students. In conclusion, we're big on starting with why. Projects should be joy added, not stress added. And if you want help figuring out how to de-stress a project, please, please, please reach out to one of us. We would love to help you brainstorm and, figure out ways to make life easier. It's not cheating to make life easier. Everybody will do better if you can find those hacks. Go through your planning phases ahead of time. Ask other teachers to talk it through with you. I almost always talk my project plans through with another teacher before I implement. And then keep experimenting. What works for you? I love sewing and painting and crafting. Other people are big with the 3D printer and the tech and the editing and all of these things. I have a colleague who loves cooking, so he's always cooking with a thing. That's his thing. Find what your thing is, what works for your school, your community, and find a balance that everyone can grow through.
Absolutely. And we also would just encourage you to, if there's something in your brain that you're working on and you don't have a colleague, as Stephanie said, we're happy to be your thought partner. So if you want to talk on the phone, if you want to Zoom, if you want to email, like, here's my directions. What do you think about this? We'd be happy to be a thought partner because it does take time and lots of go arounds until you get something that you want, if projects are something that you're interested in doing with your students. But we both feel that it's worthwhile, joyful, memorable, and a reason to take Latin. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that the Spanish kids are doing the same projects. Maybe they are. I'm
Make
not trying,
Latin the fun
not trying to diss
language.
Spanish.
Make Latin the fun language.
Exactly. So projects are a way to do that, but students learn things through them too. And that's the most important reason to do them. So we'll stop here. And I mean, it's 8 o'clock, so it is the stopping time. But if anybody has questions, we're happy to take them.
Well done, ladies. Such good suggestions. And I hope this is an inspiration to all of you listening. And as they said, if you have questions or aren't quite sure about what to do, feel free to get in touch with them. You can certainly email training@cambridgelatin.org, and we can put you in touch with either one or both of them. And again, if you need a professional development certificate, email training@cambridgelatin.org. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you all so much.